Now, before the Dick Wrestler gimmick hit, it's worked so well since you've adopted it. You know, you didn't make the cut on TNA Gut Check. I remember that. Were you starting to worry that the clock was ticking on you making it? I mean, how close were you to looking for a real job?
Well, I did. I mean, the TNA Gut Check thing, it actually became a little bit of work because I was under contract for a year with them afterwards. You know, it was just a thing where, you know, they were doing this reality-based segment on television, and you know, they're bringing in these guys that were, you know, from the independents and giving them matches on TV, on live TV, and you know, then they were letting the judges critique them. So you know, I went and had my match with Austin Aries, which was great. Well, it wasn't a great match, but it was great that I was wrestling with Austin Aries because we're familiar with each other, and so we went and had a match, and I thought it was good. I thought it was solid. I got nothing but positive feedback, and then you know, they told me, you know, I don't know how much of it was a work on their side, but they didn't tell me anything. But right before I went out to do the judges segment, you know, two things happened. One, Hulk Hogan came up to me and said, "Hey, no matter what happens out there, we like you. We like what we saw. We have interest in you." So in my head, I'm already, okay, he's probably telling me they're going to say no. And then Eric Bischoff pulls me aside and says, "I understand you're pretty good with a microphone. Feel free to speak your mind out there." So, you know, I went and did. So I went out and did that. And, you know, having an idea. You know, I was a heel on the segment, so having an idea that I was going to get told no, and being a heel, you know, I did the whole thing where I started yelling at Taz after Taz said no, and you know, after that segment, I guess that they really liked that. So then they you know, they offered me a contract afterwards, but they were going to keep it. They were going to keep the storyline that I got rejected, and that, you know, I had to kind of break into the impact zone and rush the stage and rush the ring. So that was really cool. It probably got a little bit more to what your question was after they released me after a year, because then it was more like well, you know, I had this like cup of coffee of national exposure. Where do I go from here? And that's when it was more like you know, I gotta figure out whether you know, at that point I was wrestling for 13 years, so at that point I had to figure out whether wrestling was still in me or if I needed to pursue something else.
Now, when you started doing the Dick Wrestling bit, especially in the early days, Joey, what was the reaction of your opponents when you pitched it, when you went over stuff? Did anybody out and out refuse? And has acceptance of it and cooperation gotten greater now that the success of it is spread? It's always, and more people know it now, so, and then people are familiar with it when they go into a match with me, but the pitching, it was always odd, you know, like, I remember when I wrestled Billy Gunn for the first time and I had to pitch it to him. That was a little bit like, you know, because Billy Gunn's a giant human being, and he has bear paws too, so if he wanted to crush it, he could probably crush it. Yeah, so I mean, but I think, and then the first time I wrestled Cody Rhodes, and I hadn't met him. Well, I had met him one time backstage at WWE, but I didn't really know him at the time. I thought, okay, he's literally like 2 months out of his WWE deal. There's not a chance he's going to want to do this bit with me. And then when I got there, he was like, "Hey, so how are we going to get into the dick flip?" And I was like, "Oh, you want to do it?" He's like, "Yeah, the audience wants to see it. We have to pay it off for the audience." So I feel like, you know, as long as it doesn't make anybody too uncomfortable to do, I feel like most wrestlers understand that the audience wants to see it, and most wrestlers, at least most good wrestlers, want to deliver for the audience. Has anybody just flat out said, "No, I'm not doing it"?
Nobody's really said no. In fact, I kind of find it the opposite, where like now when I wrestle somebody, because I'm literally the only wrestler you can do this stuff with. So when I go to wrestle somebody, most of the time now they have all these ideas that they pitch to me. They're like, "Oh, you know, I found out we were wrestling, and I came up with all these dick spot ideas and dick stuff we could do," because they can't do that any other time in any other match they have. It's very Joey Ryan specific. If anything, though, you know, I've had you know, a few people have said that, like,
they don't want to do anything that looks fake, right? So what we just do, we tease it and take it away. Sometimes I've flipped the referee after the match to pay it off to the audience, but no one's ever not sold for it. Because like, even like the atomic drop to the knee, or sometimes I do the collide spot and they do the head first, the flare flop into my dick and they sell. But that stuff, I mean, I might have a foreign object in my trunk, so that could be explained. The flip is hard to explain, so I've had some people be like, oh, is there anything we can do? And then we do, they don't mind selling for it. They don't mind doing all the other stuff. It's like the flip. They're like, oh, maybe I don't want to do that because it makes wrestling look fake. But that's fine. I don't want anybody to have to do, like, no one has to do it. I mean, I have this conversation before I wrestle anybody, I sit down with them and I have this, so listen, I have this shtick I do and it's a little bit risque. If there's anything that you don't like about it or don't want to do, please tell me now and we'll work around it, because wrestling, you can work around anything. Because I'd rather them tell me before we wrestle, rather than like 6 months later in a shoot interview say that I forced them to touch my penis. So, I'd rather them bring it up here and now rather than regret it later. But nobody's had any issues, really.
I got to ask this because I worked with Scott Steiner in WCW, and we were friends. We got along really well. Scott threatened me on several occasions.
That's on brand.
Remember when he dyed his hair white with the white mustache? On Nitro, I called him White Thunder. And I got backstage, hey, fat ass, knock off that White Thunder shit. You make me sound like a fucking Nazi. So I knocked it off for the sake of not getting killed. But that stuff you did with him, like, I got to be honest, Joey, I was amazed he did it, and he seemed to be into doing it. Talk about doing that with him, because that's the one thing you've done that caught me by surprise. His cooperation and really embracing that, it seemed.
Yeah, and you know what? I feel like, because I feel like people think there's more negativity towards it than there is. It's just because the negative is always more vocal. But I feel like most veterans understand like how difficult it is to get something over and then to maintain it being over. And Scott was, when the promoter asked me, he's like, hey, have you ever wrestled Scott Steiner? And I said, no. I knew him from a couple things we did together. We did the Ring King India stuff together. It's like, I know him, but we've never worked together. And he's like, well, I might book you guys in a match. And I said, okay, I'm not sure he's going to want to do any of the dick stuff. And the promoter was like, well, let me run it by him. And so when I got there, it's really whatever Scott wants to do, we're going to do. And he's like, hey, I saw your shtick, and I want to make sure that you get over, because, I want to make sure you get your stuff in and get over, because we were wrestling in Michigan, his hometown. And he's like, because I'm already going to be over, so I want to make sure you get over. And that was really cool of Scott to like insist on me doing my shtick to get over, because, he obviously his level and his brand, he doesn't have to do that, but it was really important for him to do that. And I think that shows a lot of his work ethic about like wanting to help other people out, and again, knowing how hard it is to get something over and maintain it being over. And I'll sidetrack this story because I did a show with Hacksaw Jim Duggan recently, and he saw this shtick for the first time. And this is more of a generalization of how most veterans react to it. I did the shtick. I got to the back. Hacksaw's looking at me. I know he watched it. Could go either way. He just starts laughing, and then he holds up his 2x4 and says, brother, I had to do something stupid to get over too. So that's the general consensus of most veterans.